very good evening. You're watching India Sense with me, Gauri Dwivedi. As always, we start the show with headlines. First up, the trade war between the US and China intensifies as Beijing slaps fresh 125% tariffs on American goods against Trump's 145%. Chinese President Xi Jinping's provocative posturing indicates room for negotiations is now rapidly shrinking. Mastermind of the dastardly 26/11 terror attacks, Tahawwur Rana in custody of Indian authorities. Finally, closure for victims of the attack. Trump administration doubles down on its crackdown on legal immigrants as social media accounts are mined and year-old minor offences are picked up as possible grounds for deportations and visa denials. New Delhi response to Mohammad Yunus's objectionable and callous comments about India's northeast region stops transshipment facility for Bangladesh cargo moved to hit Dhaka's exports in the region. And irreparable damage has been done to the US economy under Trump's tariff flip-flop, opines the Atlantic's managing editor Bhumika Turu. Top voice on India Sense this week. Big story on the show this week, Trump's escalating tariff war. The roller coaster ride for global markets and global trade has now stopped for every country barring China, where the tariff war has entered a dangerous phase of tit for tat. China is now charging a whopping 125% additional levy in response to Trump's 145% tariffs that are levied on Chinese goods. As the trade war intensifies, both Donald Trump and Xi Jinping look to make the most of an uncertain and a very fluid situation. This report, viewers, tells you why this is as much about ego as it is about global economics. The next 3 months will change global trade more than the last 50 years, as the Trump administration goes about stitching trade deals with 70 countries to cut trade deficits and bring manufacturing back to America after pausing the tariffs for 90 days. The pause, though, is not for China, as Donald Trump is yet to get the phone call from his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Trump's game plan is to isolate its largest trading partner and its biggest competitor. But the catch is, Xi Jinping is working on the exact same game plan to isolate America, to reduce its dependence on Washington and become more self-reliant. For China, the goal is to become self-reliant for critical technologies and high-end tech know-how. For Trump, the goal is to go back 25 years before China joined the World Trading Organization and fire up its manufacturing base once again. In fact, Xi's visit to 3 top Asian economies, Malaysia, Cambodia and Vietnam, is an effort to build a bloc against Trump's tariffs and to insulate their economies. So is the provocative posturing by China that it will not back down. But this who blinks first posturing is about global politics, which threatens to fracture global trade. As both leaders gamble, they hold leverage against the other. Since China is not a democracy, Xi Jinping knows he will be in office much longer than President Trump and needs to just bide his time for the next few years. For Trump, the precarious Chinese economy is enough leverage. America is China's largest trading partner, and disruption of this relationship will hit the Chinese economy hard, where growth forecasts have already been lowered. Globalization has resulted in trade wins for all stakeholders in the past. But in this US versus China standoff, who will be the ultimate winner remains unclear. Well, like all trade, all standoffs, all tensions, an interlocutor plays the crucial role of calming tensions. But the biggest casualty of Trump's trade war has been the trust deficit, which has left no country in a possible position to act as a trusted mediator between the US and China. Worse still, for both Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, it makes perfect political sense to continue this trade war, which may become worse than the 2017 one, as both leaders have learned from those experiences and are possibly playing on brinkmanship. And viewers, to talk more on this, I'm now joined by Bhumika Tharoor, who is managing editor at The Atlantic, to talk more about what this means in terms of the tariff war that's underway. Bhumika, let me start by asking you, the fact that tariffs have roiled the market, trade war between the world's largest and second largest economies has only worsened. Help us decode the irreparable damage, or do you think there is irreparable damage that has been done to the US economy because of the flip-flop that this week has really seen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and actually this morning we saw that China has imposed tariffs against the US now to 125%. And so what I think we're waiting to see now is what happens when you have these two giant, formidable countries in a standoff against each other, right? And what that means for example, for American consumers, what it means for consumers abroad. And presumably in this type of situation, you would hope that the best position to be in for the US, for example, is to then partner with its allies and find ways to then form a stronger barrier against China, or to have more negotiating power that way.
Bhumika, the fact that China has increased their tariffs, the president has even said that he's now not going to back down. This is tough positioning, isn't it? Are you looking at a long, maybe a protracted trade war between the two largest economies in the world?
This is what's going to be, this is difficult to say, but what we know is that, initially Trump was elected largely, or partially at least, because people viewed him as the CEO president, the businessman president. But the reality is that what this has all caused is a lot of uncertainty and instability, and every investor, CEO, foreign government knows that the worst thing for any in any kind of business environment is instability and uncertainty. It means that businesses may be hesitant to grow in terms of hiring, or consumers will kind of clamp down more their spending. They'll be more conservative because everyone's uncertain about what happens next. And I think all of this is going to manifest in the trade war. But when you have people who are spending less, when you have companies who are hiring less, these are all triggers for a recession, or these are all warning signs for a recession. So it's possible that that we are engaged in a long trade war. China has been very clear about their firm stance, and they don't feel inclined to, at this point at least, to back down. Trump has made very clear that he feels very strongly about this. But of course, as we've seen, and as has to some extent been the case of the Trump administration, that there's a lot of whiplash. There's a lot of quick turns, abrupt decisions. And so it's true, we currently have a pause for 90 days, obviously, with the exception of China with regards to reciprocal tariffs. But it's to be seen what moves happen in the meantime. But even, and my colleagues have written about this, that even if there is a pause, or there's a temporary reprieve, the lasting kind of sentiments, economics are largely based on human behaviors, and then the lasting sentiments around this will be a lot of trepidation and worry for what might happen. But I think, in this world with so many quick pivots, it's hard to predict, but it seems like people are really, these larger states are rooted in.
Indeed. Indeed. You mentioned about the 90 days. I want to ask you this, that what happens after the 90-day pause? Because there's enough and more uncertainty. What happens? Because 3 months is a very long period, and no one knows what will happen then.
Yeah, I mean, listen, a lot can happen in 3 months, because we've seen a lot happen in the last week. the last week has felt almost like a year. So at this stage, anything can happen. Trump initially signaled that he's open for negotiations. He's not open to negotiations. There's a lot of back and forth. I think what's the mystery is what is moving a lot of the decisions internally. What ultimately was the pressure that felt heavy enough for Trump to change positions. We've heard from different people within the administration that everyone's on board with this decision, and then this is what's great. Trump had the analogy that these proposals and these tariff policies are akin to a sick patient having to take medicine. And so it's going to be terrible for a little bit, but then we'll get through it. But then, of course, very quickly we saw a pivot and we had the pause. So anything can happen within these 90 days, but I think the one thing that's certain is that the stain and the kind of the instability that this has caused has for sure created a lot of uncertainty within people who help keep the economy moving.
And in the midst of this, where do you see countries like India? We are heavily dependent on China, but we're also having America as our largest trading partner.
Yeah, India's in an interesting position. And I think, this is something a lot of countries are thinking about. The point that I made earlier about the U.S. and its position with allies, if we, in what seems likely, if we end up in a position where the U.S. is posed against China, the best thing would be to for the U.S. to build partnerships with its allies that are then beneficial for the allies themselves, who are thinking about their exports and their imports. But we've seen, rhetoric where initially Trump mentioned he wanted to annex Canada or encroach upon Greenland, and I think it's complicated all around. I'm curious what India's stance will be, especially as this country with different ties or allegiances for various reasons between the U.S. and China. I think that'll be an interesting story to see how it plays out.
All right, let's leave it there, Bhumika. I really appreciate you joining me today as the top voice this week on India Sense. The first wide-angle story on the show. Tahawwur Rana, the man who played a key role in orchestrating the horrific Mumbai attacks of 2008, is finally in India under the heavy cloak of law and order. Wheels of justice may be slow, but they have crushed another pawn of terror. Rana's extradition is not a routine legal procedure. It's a calculated strategic move, a checkmate in a game where India has played with patience, persistence, and precision. He's not just another accused, he's a symbol. His presence in India's custody is a chilling reminder to those lurking across the border, funding chaos from comfort zones in the West, that there is no sanctuary permanent enough to shield them forever. For anti-India elements plotting from afar, whether nestled in the neighborhoods of Toronto or hiding behind advocacy groups in Chicago, this is your warning shot. The message is clear. The long arm of Indian justice will reach you, no matter how many legal smokescreens you hide behind. The net is tightening. This move also underscores a diplomatic masterstroke. New Delhi has shown that it can not only hold the moral high ground, but also pull off complex international maneuvers. And now with Rana in the NIA's grip, the real story begins. One of interrogation and revelation. The walls are closing in, the safe havens are shrinking. This is India telling the world, we do not forget, we do not forgive, and we most certainly do not stop. All right, on that note, I slip into a very short break. Come back on the other side, talk more about the visa agony and possible deportations that hundreds of students in America are facing. We come back and talk more of that. Stay with us. Another wide-angle story on the show. They came with dreams, not just to study, but to innovate, to build, to contribute. Indian students, especially in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and maths, have long powered the American progress. From Silicon Valley to NASA, their fingerprints are everywhere. But now a quiet storm is forcing many to pack their bags and leave.
I feel very scared. I really came here to study.
Unprecedented things done by this Republican government.
We need to stand up when things like this happen because otherwise they'll keep happening.
In recent weeks, many Indian students have received shocking notices. Their student visas have been cancelled. Reason? Not terrorism, not national security, but petty issues like changing lanes without signalling, a dropped shoplifting charge, or even a 10-year-old incident that was flagged at the airport. Not guilty, yet treated as though they are. AI-driven monitoring, remnants of Trump-era immigration crackdowns on sudden national security interpretations have turned academic institutions into pressure cookers for international students. More than 80 universities have been impacted. Students from top schools with spotless academic creds now face deportation, often without recourse or a clear explanation, and the consequences go beyond individual careers. In fact, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said last month the State Department under his direction has revoked more than 300 visas. Most of them are student visas. Indian STEM students, as I said, are the backbone of American innovation. If this exodus continues, the US could lose decades of future scientists, coders, doctors, entrepreneurs. Experts warn it may set the country back in both tech and research. Now, viewers, what can students do in such a situation? They need to know the exact reason for their visa issue. They need to reach out to their international student services. They may help with appeals. Hire a qualified immigration attorney, students, if you are in the midst of this. That could make the big difference. Apply for reinstatement using Form I-539 if you're eligible. Stay calm and inform, most importantly. America has long called itself the land of opportunity, but if a single traffic mistake can now cost you your future, is that opportunity still real, is the question. This isn't just about visas, it's now beginning to be a lot about values. Inside story on the show. Is it national security or is it theatrics? Trump's push for a Golden Dome missile shield has the entire US defense contractor industry wait in anticipation. And critics, though, are raising red flags. A new study says the plan is not just improbable, in fact, it may even be scientifically impossible. But that hasn't stopped the billions of dollars to flow in. This report tells you what's exactly the fuss all about.
My focus is on building the most powerful military of the future. Golden Dome missile defense shield to protect our homeland, all made in the USA.
It's the biggest idea no one believes can work, and the price tag is just as massive.
Golden Dome missile defense shield to protect
President Trump's so-called Golden Dome is a sweeping missile defense fantasy that would stretch from sea to shining sea. Its promise to shoot down everything from nukes to hypersonics. But critics say it's chasing shadows with dollar signs.
We have a missile launch detection.
Confirmed. We have missile warning.
Continuous tracking confirmed.
Interceptor launch.
Interceptor onboard targeting active.
The Pentagon is expected to submit plans this week, but according to a landmark report by the American Physical Society, the science isn't just shaky, it's shattering. Boost phase, mid-course terminal intercepts, each phase of missile defense comes with problems more tangled than a barrel of snakes. And the Golden Dome, it would require thousands of satellite weapons in orbit just to handle one North Korean missile. That's not defense, it's science fiction. But is this mission impossible or mission profitable? Defense giants and startups alike smell opportunity. Over 360 proposals have hit the Pentagon's desk. Swarms of AI drones, space lasers, drone blimps. Under Trump 2.0, if it sounds wild, it's on the table. The Golden Dome might never lift off, but Wall Street already has. For America's defense industry, it seems like a golden goose wrapped in red, white, and boom.
All target objects eliminated.
In a stunning rebuke from the judiciary, Pakistan's scorched earth refugee policy has hit a wall. With boots on ground and hearts in hand, thousands of Afghans are now being driven out. Remember, 800,000 have already been deported and sent back to possible executions and their executioners. This report tells you and digs behind the hypocrisy, the horror, and the human toll of these deportations.
It's a tale as old as war, but with new levels of cruelty. Pakistan, once the safe harbor for over 3 million Afghan refugees, is now tossing its guests out like yesterday's news. And even those with the legal right to stay, around 1.3 million residential permit card holders, are caught in the dragnet. Despite a crystal clear extension on their legal stay until 30th of June, law enforcement across Pakistan has now gone rogue, raiding homes, arresting women, and throwing families into chaos. They were told they could stay, but on ground, reality tells a different story. The Peshawar High Court has weighed in, slamming the brakes yet again after a similar January on unlawful deportations and demanding that law enforcement keep their hands off legal residents. You cannot move the goalposts mid-game, the judges said in effect, reminding the state that legality still matters even in a land where law often bowls to politics. Meanwhile, 800,000 ACC holders, Afghans with another form of Pakistani-issued IDs, have been reportedly already been handed a one-way ticket back to Taliban rule. Among them, women activists, journalists, rights defenders, all being returned to their executioners. These aren't just deportations, they are death sentences wrapped in paperwork targeting the very people Islamabad claimed to protect.
It's time to get you the Worldview segment on the show. They say loose lips sink ships, and this time it's not metaphorical. Bangladesh's interim chief advisor Mohammad Yunus shot from the hip in Beijing, dubbing Dhaka the only guardian of the ocean for northeast India. Delhi has fired back without much delay and not with words. India shut the gates on a vital trade artery, yanking the transshipment facility that propped up billions in Bangladeshi exports. That's not just tit for tat, it's dollars turned to dust. What was meant to be strategic posturing turned into a diplomatic self-goal. As they say, don't bite the hand that lets your goods sail. With China waiting in the wings and India's patience wearing thin, Yunus's motor mouth may have cost Bangladesh more than just face. It's cost them freight, future and friends. A damning betrayal not just of justice but of the very girls Keir Starmer's Labour government in the UK swore to protect. The government promised truth, accountability and justice in the face of horrific grooming gang scandals. But instead, what they've done is nothing. They've shrunk from that promise. Inquiries once declared essential are now little more than just local audits. Underfunded, underpowered and unbelievably timid. The decision to sideline full inquiries reeks of cowardice and political calculation, not compassion. Why? Because the alleged abusers are predominantly from Pakistani Muslim backgrounds, and Labour, terrified of offending key voter blocs, has chosen appeasement over justice. This is abandonment of the worst kind, where justice has been left aside. Well, justice doesn't get scheduled around election optics, but that is what is the case here in the UK under Keir Starmer's government. With that, it's a wrap with this edition of India Sense. Thanks so much for watching.